Let's do it.
All right. Hey, guys. Welcome to a Hallam cast. It's the first ever. So this is a monumental occurrence. Desperate times, desperate things. So we got the COVID-19 episode of a Sig Hallam cast. So, or a Hallam Siegcast, depending on how you want to look at it. But
I'll be first. That's fine. I like it.
As you guys know, there's some updates to the AP exam, big updates. So I think the first thing we need to look at is when, and when will be actually a week later, right, than the actual original plan for the test. I know for AP Euro, it will be on May 13th at 4 p.m. Mr. Hallam?
Yeah, for APUS, it's going to be Friday, May 15th at 2 p.m. So
2 more days.
Two nice. More days.
Yeah. So you're at 2 p.m. We're 4 p.m. And I know this is going to be stupid for you guys to think about, but I got to say that you got to understand that it is Eastern. It's really important that that we know the exact time because it is online. That you guys need to know. It's going to be across the board at the same time. So just an example for my test, if it's at 4 p.m., that means on the West Coast, it's going to be at 1 p.m. There really, as far as I know, is no margin for error there. Everybody needs to be on their computer and, taking this test at the same time nationwide.
Yeah, set an alarm on your phone now, if you're taking it just a couple hours before, just to make sure you're there and ready.
A reminder, yes. I did that once, Mr. Hallam, in college. It was political science. I believe it was my sophomore year. And my mom came up to Westminster and just kind of unannounced and said, "Hey, you want to go to lunch?" And of course, free meal, not at the cafeteria. And honest to God, I remember sitting at lunch, and about halfway through, I was with my mother and my grandmother, of all people, God rest her soul. And I remember getting this sick feeling in my stomach. We had a group final, and I was supposed to be there. I had done most of the work, and like I said, it was a group project. So we didn't have phones back then, let alone reminders. That's how old I am. But luckily, my group told the professor, I don't know where he is. He did a lot of this, and I went, and luckily I was able to salvage a B. But I literally missed a final exam in college. So yeah, set a reminder and be ready to go. So little life lesson there. Anything else to add about the time, Mr. Hallam, that you can think of?
No, I think that's good. So yeah, just make sure everyone's taking at the same time. So make sure you're there. That'd be good.
Yeah. So another thing that's really good, if we went from the when, now we're going to go to the what. What is this new COVID-19 AP US or Euro exam? That the cool thing is, whether you're taking AP Euro, AP US, AP World, not that anybody in our school is taking AP World, but the rubric and the template and what the exam looks like is identical. We're all looking, instead of 7 documents DBQ, we're looking at a 5-document DBQ. And I know that's not necessarily what you guys signed up for. You guys signed up for multiple choice, short answer questions, an LEQ, and then of course a DBQ. It's just not going to happen. And I will say this to precursor any, as you guys have been getting some of this information, I'm sure, whether it be on social media or on the college board, I don't think it's the end of the world. I really, and Mr. Hallam and I have talked before this meeting has gone down, but I think that many of you are capable of, passing and not only passing, actually passing with flying colors. So I know some of you guys are probably a little bit nervous or have some anxiety on this, and rightfully so. But I think after tonight, I think that maybe you guys will look at this a little bit differently, I hope. And and those things. I think this might be, Mr. Hallam, a good time to let them know our back and forth during the meeting when they were like conveying this new change. If you guys don't know this, was that Thursday?
Yeah, that was Thursday night. I think this past Thursday night. So
yeah.
So
Thursday night there was a webinar, and the guy that was in charge of the college board, and I'll do impersonation. He kept like talking and itching, and
it's a little weird.
But it was a little weird, and he was explaining all this stuff, and then he basically verbally threatened you guys as students, and he also threatened us as teachers.
Yeah.
Mr. Hallam and I were significantly turned off by that, but once we got through that and looked at some of the things that were actually published on Friday, there's some things that I think you guys are going to see as opportunities here to possibly do pretty well.
Yeah, and I think from my end, I definitely know with my group, and I'm sure Mr. Sieg's group as well. Like everyone is definitely capable. This is all we're getting is a DBQ with 2 less documents, so it's something everyone's practiced, and we'll go over the adjustments to have the scoring. But you're still basically doing the same things. You're still doing the same things that you've been doing on these before. So. I kind of reiterate. I think everyone's going to be fine, and I think it's actually going to be an opportunity to do well because you're well versed in this and you kind of know what to expect, even though it is a big change.
Yeah. In fact, I don't know if I want to do the screen share right now, but you guys need to know, like in terms of how this is going to. This is really nothing crazy different for you guys. We've predominantly for a DBQ had a 7-point rubric, right? And in that 7 points, without having it like right in front of me, you had a thesis, a contextualization, not necessarily in that order, and then you had the ability to get 3 points in regards to the documents. How many documents you used, cap statements, those types of things. And then, you had outside information, just 1 point for outside information. And then, whatever we've talked about, corroboration,
synthesis,
talked about synthesis and things like that, perhaps in a separate paragraph, whether that be a concluding paragraph or just, like, again, if you're just using a C statement as we teach, you could do that separately. But instead of a 7-point rubric, you're going now to a 10-point rubric, and we're going to share that with you here shortly. And really, even though it's a different rubric in terms of point value, there's nothing new that, right? I mean, back me up here, Mr. Hallam. There's nothing new that they're asking you to do. It's just been modified. And I can speak to the AP Euro crowd. Traditionally, the rule of thumb for AP Euro on the AP exam is DBQs. You're not going to have anything from the Renaissance or the Reformation. So, if we look at the time periods, historical period 1's 1450 to 1648. You're basically traditionally looking at 1648 to about the year 2000. However, with the modifications based on the instruction that we're all dealing with, for AP Euro, we're only going through 3 historical periods as opposed to 4. And I know in APUS you have 9, correct?
Right. And we're in the DBQ for APUS. What they've said is it's going to be between 1754 and 1945. So that they're definitely lobbing down the materials. So those first 2 historical periods aren't going to be the DBQ.
Right.
And
it's no Pocahontas, man.
Not going to be there. But also the stuff that we haven't learned, that we stopped, World War II, that's not going to be there either. So for both courses, they're kind of shortening that span of what could be on here. And Mr. Sieg and I talked. Our guess is they're probably going to try to make it a little more thematic to cover as much topically and time-wise as they can, right? They want to see your overall knowledge of the course. So I think we'll see something fairly We don't know, but I think we'll see something fairly general to try to encompass, more
See what you know.
Yeah, see what you actually know. So,
so for the time period, you said 1754, which is the beginning of the French and Indian War, the 7 Years' War in European history, to 1945. Just for those of you who are listening that are AP Euro students, it's generally, Renaissance, so 1450 to 1914. So right before the First World War. So no First World War, no Second World War. I mean, again, that pains me as a history guy. But this is unprecedented times, and I just wanted you guys to know that basically everything from 1450 to 1914 essentially will be in play. So
let's can we hit on some of the logistics, I guess, and before we get into the rubric?
Yeah.
So the time for you to take this is shorter than you would have gotten on the AP test, right? And so that's the reduction of documents is kind of you're going to have 45 minutes to take this DBQ. Okay, so it's shorter than you would have before, but you're also dealing with less documents. And as we'll go over when we go over the rubric, the expectations of how much to use is a little bit less as well. So, I think that could be a little bit scary, but it's something we'll practice over this next month. We'll kind of get down. So there's going to be a timer when you take the test. You'll log into College Board. You have to log into the device that you are going to use to submit your test. So you're actually going to get a choice. You can type it, or you can, handwrite it and then take pictures and upload it. But you have to use the device that you're going to upload those with to take the test. So you could go on your phone. You could log into College Board. If you're going to handwrite it, then you could take those pictures on your phone and upload it. Or I think we'll kind of talk about what you should do. But if you use a computer, log in the computer, you can type it in a Google Doc, type it on a Word document, you can just copy and paste it over, and that's pretty easy. So Mr. Sieg and I talked a little bit about kind of which approach you may want to take, and my suggestion, I know most of the APUS class when I gave you that choice in the first semester on DBQs did type it. I think that's just going to be a better use of your time if you feel like you're good at that and feel like you can type fairly quickly. It also makes it a lot easier to move sentences around, copy and paste, paragraphs. You can make edits very quickly. You definitely can write it if that's your choice. And I know I definitely have some kids that probably, you probably will make that choice. But part of that 45 minutes is going to be uploading those pictures of the handwritten text, that you wrote out, or copying and pasting over. So you have to kind of think about that too.
So some of you have taken an AP test before. Some of you haven't. Traditionally, for the written part of this, whether normally when it's an LEQ and a DBQ, you actually get a 15-minute reading period. In other words, you kind of get a 15-minute period to look at all the questions and get a game plan. All right, this is the LEQ that I'm going to write because I'm comfortable with it. This is how I'm going to organize my DBQ. You actually have some time to get a game plan, to analyze, to start your outline. You don't have that, which is. I know for some of you that's going to be like, kind of crazy. But like, just to reiterate what Mr. Hallam is saying here, you have 45 minutes. I do think, Mr. Hallam, I did read that there is going to be a 5-minute grace period for uploading the documents.
Cool.
So total 50 minutes, but like 45 minutes to write it, and then to make sure you have to make sure you have the amount of time ready, right? And so you were talking about setting a timer and things of that nature. You actually might want to practice this a few times, and certainly, Mr. Hallam, I will probably give you a few examples or a few opportunities to practice this. Obviously, we can't be there to big brother like the College Board would, like us to do. We can't physically supervise you, but you're going to have the opportunity to kind of time yourself. We'll obviously give you examples of modified prompts, in documents where you can kind of collectively, kind of get your game plan ready and just kind of, figure out your plan of attack for this. But you really do. You have to leave that 5-minute period out of 50 to literally like make sure that you're able to submit it. So you really want to hold yourself to that 45-minute time period. And that brings me, go ahead.
And they'll have a timer on screen,
yes,
counting down for you. You can turn that off if it gives you too much anxiety, but you don't want to turn it off and then forget. And then if it's too late, they're not going to accept anything. So
right,
so yeah, that's also something to be aware of, that will be there for you to utilize. I
think the other thing that we just need to get out there too is, and I've you guys are always, I know my students are always just point blank honest with me, and I appreciate that. Whether it's the whole pass fail grade for this fourth quarter or what have you. I've heard a couple students say, "Oh, it's going to be like open note. That's great. We're going to get a bunch of people together and take this together." You may want to think twice about that. I know from my style, if I was trying to take this test in 45 minutes with that timer that Mr. Hallam just talked about, you really don't have time to have distractions. Do you want to elaborate on that, Mr. Hallam? I think that you need to stay focused. If you want to have some notes out, and we'll talk a little bit about that, maybe you organize your notes in 50 to 100 year increments where you highlight, 3 to 4 key events, people, places, just to keep your mindset on the topic at hand. And then maybe that helps you contextualize, maybe that helps you synthesize, maybe that helps you actually bring in some relevant outside information. But I think distractions, you're gonna want to keep distractions to a minimum. I think.
Yeah, and when Mr. Sieg mentioned before that on Thursday that the vice president of the AP testing, threatened us students, Trevor Packer, he's basically what he was threatening was cheating and plagiarism, and that maybe there's students that would be calling each other, talking to each other during this test, or teachers that might be on a Google Hangout and giving information, whatever. I think what Mr. Sieg said is clear. Like you can't do that, but there are probably going to be students that do. I think they're going to do worse because
I really do.
You're going to try to be talking to 5 people in 45 minutes to try to write this out. It's not going to, it's not going to happen. But, having notes is fine. Having, using the internet's fine. Using your textbook's fine, but that stuff's going to be difficult too. So I'm kind of with Mr. Sieg, and it's something, I plan on working on to prepare you, giving you just like 2 pages that you can print out, and have with you and have examples. I think that's going to be the best way to kind of handle it. And I think most of my group and most of your Euro group, I'm sure as well, you're well prepared in most of these thematic units that you can do well without trying to Google 50 things. And then
I don't think you'll be, honestly, Mr. Hallam, I don't think they'll have time to Google. If you have notes in front of you laid out, I'm trying to use a visual here. I think that's good, but you start, as well as I do, you start Googling things, you're going to deal with things that are very specific or very vague. And a lot of times when you Google something, it takes you to another site and then another site and another site. And, you only have 45 minutes. So I agree with you. I don't think that should be comforting to you that, I can use the internet or whatever. I think that'll actually steer you in the wrong direction, if that makes sense, and make it harder to meet the time parameters of the test. So again, I agree with Mr. Hallam. We're going to do some things to get you some things that maybe you could print out and have in front of you. And I would strongly discourage you from thinking that, oh, just the day of the test I'll show up and I'll Google a bunch of stuff, because I don't think you'll be able to formulate an argument if you leave the chance like that. That's just my opinion. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. Is there anything else logistically you have? I think that's all the notes I had for how it will operate. But if anyone has questions, we'll end up taking those as well. So
I think the other thing, I don't know if this is necessarily logistic, but I think one of the things that you guys still need to know that there will be a curve. They'll scale this thing. They don't have to worry now about, if you remember, and again, I can't think off the top of my head because I don't have the information, but the multiple choice, was it 45% or some whatever the percentage was, and then they have the SAQ, the LEQ, and the DBQ. I mean, this is it. And while that might cause some of you guys a little bit of anxiety, I think you do need to keep in mind that it's 10 points total, and in terms of, and again, this is just me speculating. I think, obviously, if you get 10 out of 10, we'll show you the rubric here shortly. You're going to get a 5. Fantastic. Possibly, actually, Mr. Hallam, maybe 9 out of 10. You'd probably get a 5. Between a 6 and an 8, all right, you're probably looking at a 4. And then maybe 5 to 6 is in that 3 range, give or take. So again, you need not be perfect. We'll look at the rubric, and Mr. Hallam and I will make some suggestions to things that maybe you can focus on things that you're good at. I mean, honestly, he can reiterate this, but you could really just be really good at 2 documents, right? And legitimately pass. So 2 out of 5 documents.
Yeah, and it seems like that's how they're kind of setting it up, so that that 45-minute time crunch is quick, and so they're setting it up so that you don't have to be perfect on all 5 documents. Like if you can nail 2, then you really have a good chance at a 3 in total for the score. And if you're really good at 4 out of 5, then you have a really good chance at a 5, So I think they've kind of set this up so it is a little bit easier, to do this in less time.
Right. So do you want to go ahead and do you want me to try to share?
Yeah, why don't you try to share your screen?
I don't know how this will work with with recording this. This is kind of new to both of us, but
yeah.
Certainly, in fact, what do I want to do? Present now? How did that happen?
Yeah. Present now. We'll try. We'll both post this rubric up as well. So you'll
think was it a window, Shane? Is that what I wanted to do?
Yeah, I think try the window.
You got that?
No.
Fantastic.
It's
all mine. I swear that's what we did earlier. Okay, let me go back and
maybe try the full thing.
How about that?
There you go. That worked. There we go.
Okay. I'm presenting to everyone. It just told me. Fantastic.
Yeah, so, and once again, this is the same rubric for APUS and AP Euro. It's the exact same thing. So
exact same thing. And I got to give a shout out to our boy Tom Richey. Mm-hmm. This is his rubric. I know that Mr. Hallam and I have used his rubrics over the years, and Mr. Hallam's been ripping on me, but Mr. Richey and I have been going back and forth on Twitter and emails, just about some of these changes and the things that the College Board's doing. But it really, he does a good job of kind of giving you a game plan here. So let's just take a look at the first 2. So if you go down, you see here that it's 10 points, and so how do we get those 10 points? Well, if you look on these first 2 areas right here, it's the exact same thing that we've been doing all year, right? So if you're able to formulate a thesis paragraph, much like we've worked on all year, you're going to get a point. I would say this, Mr. Hallam, being that the time is of the essence, I know traditionally I tell my AP Euro students to try to have 3 sub-thesis categories. I would still probably recommend that, but if they can't come up with it and they're comfortable with 2, I'm cool with that. I think that's okay. You agree?
I agree. And as we'll talk about with the rest of the points, I think 2 subcategories will be enough to do really well.
Yeah. So here you have your thesis, your claim, and obviously you know that you must make a claim that responds to the prompt. And again, I know I'm reading this, but it can be anywhere. But if you follow the format that Mr. and Hallam and I both stick to, this will be a lot easier. In fact, if it were our rubric, this would be first, right? And then this would be second. The contextualization, just setting it up. What has happened leading up to this? So for AP Euro, if it were the Renaissance, obviously you'd kind of elaborate a little bit on the fall of Constantinople, or maybe the demise of the Middle Ages and some of the changes that were going on leading up to the Renaissance. And I can give you a bunch of other examples. If you're APUS and you're talking about the
if you're talking about like Reconstruction, right, you're gonna talk about the lead up to the Civil War, when it happened in the Civil War. Take that step back from what the topic and time period is.
Or I was thinking something that would overlap with Euro and US would be something like the American Revolution and the Constitutional Convention and yada yada. You could probably talk about some of the ideals of the Enlightenment, and that's something that obviously we focus on in Euro too. So and if you do those things, now you already have 2 out of 10 points. Now, as we go down to the documents, evidence and analysis, I think this is kind of interesting. You get a point right here for accurately, just basically correctly using 2 documents. Right? I mean,
that's it. 2 out of 5.
Yeah, 2 out of 5. That's it. And boom, you get that point. And I've read good DBQs this year. I've read some bad ones, but I've even the bad ones, I would say, would already, normally get this point. Okay.
Right. And you can describe more than 2. And as long as you get 2 described accurately, you will get this point too. So, if you have that time, and we'll talk about some of the other ones where you need more than 2 documents, but if you talk about 4 and you get 2 right, you still get this point. So it's a very easy point. It's very easy I think, to get these first 3 points.
Yeah. And the next one, I'll just chime in. If you look, there's kind of 2 prerequisites here. If you support the argument in response to the prompt using at least 2 documents, you'll get 1 point. Or if you at least use 4, so you still have the opportunity to leave one of these documents out, and you're going to score well. Again, in this case, if you look here at the fine print, it said these documents should meet and exceed standard set for the description point. These are things where you're not just listing the documents, right? You're not just describing the documents, you're actually using them as part of your argument. And, you kind of, if you set your paper up the way Mr. Hallam and I have taught you to do, and you formulate a thesis, an argumentative thesis based on the content, you're probably going to do this honestly without much effort. For lack of better terminology, Mr. Hallam, you agree?
Yeah, it's all about relating back to that thesis statement,
right?
And saying, hey, this document supports my. That's why that word "support" is underlined. This document supports my thesis. Here's how. I think
it should be in that sub thesis category, which obviously does that for you. So,
and it's it's why both of us, went so hard about categorizing the documents,
Yes.
right? That's not
Correct.
a point, but that's kind of this point if you categorize them well.
Yeah, and I don't mean to kind of water it down, but if you do it that way, you're going to probably get this point or 2 points if you use four documents. So that's the support, and then the explains category here. And again, I'm pointing to my screen. You can't see me; you just see my screen. But this is the how or why. This is your cap statement. This is your your context or your audience, your purpose or your point of view, your historical situation, that type of thing, and how that's relevant to the document. So that's in a lot of cases to these, that's an additional sentence where you're recognizing something within what you've already described, and you guys have done this pretty well throughout the year. But you take a by the way, I do want to kind of backtrack a little bit. You do not want to quote. You don't want a big quote. You want to paraphrase. You want to put it in your own words. You want to describe these things. But let's just say, for lack of a better thing, you bring up, and I hate to do this for the Euro kids because they don't appreciate it, but you want to talk about the burned over district, or you want to bring up the Oneida or something like that. And you have a document and you've explained it, but then now you start talking about the point of view of the author, or the purpose. And if I go to Euro, Napoleon may have written or made this statement because he knew inevitably that the odds were stacked against them. However, he didn't want his soldiers to know this going in. It's just one of those extra statements that really explains not just the document that you're using, but it really explains that you get it, you understand how this document fits in, and it really helps you situate your argument and directly relate that back to the the thesis.
And I think one of the ways that with how this changes happen that can be real easy with this is just think of putting one cap statement per body paragraph, right? Because that's all you're going to need now. So that's all you have to really worry about. Okay, for this category documents, one of those documents I got to have a cap statement, and then if you only have 2 body paragraphs, like we said, I think you can get away with. You can still get both of these points by doing one cap statement per body paragraph.
And again, if we look at this, even if you just did one, I mean, I'll scroll up. If you do a good thesis, you have a decent contextualization. You've certainly used 2 documents. You're 3. We said if you relate this back to your thesis and organize it like we've said, there should be a really legitimate chance for you if you use 4 documents for you to get 2 points here. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're already passing, right?
Yep.
Potentially.
That's probably 3.
And even if you use one cap statement, now you're in the 6. I think that you guys are very capable of having 2. Don't get me wrong, but just looking at this big picture wise, it's very doable. And then that leads us to the second part, or not second part. That's just poor numbering. But if we go down to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 part, we're looking at outside information here, Mr. Hallam. And usually you're really only required since 2017 to use one example. Here they're allowing you, and this is why I kind of think that thematic approach is something that the College Board is going to look to, is they've added this, they've updated it, and you're allowed to use up to 2 points, 2 examples of outside historical evidence to bring in to this discussion. So, for me, like if you're thinking, let's just say, mercantilism, we're talking about mercantilism in AP Euro. And I bring in that, after the Panic of 1873, that Europe kind of went back to that model with protectionism and tariffs and things like that after the Enlightenment with free trade, Adam Smith and all that stuff. Like that's a good example of outside information. And that's why we're going to try to give you some study guides that have some things outlined for you, in front of you. And hopefully there'll be some quick references for you to get at least one, and who knows, maybe up to 2 points for this. If you can find something that directly relates to, now again, this has to be outside of the documents, right?
Right.
Mr. Hallam. So
yes. And I think the other piece of this too, as Mr. Sieg was saying, this is where having, 2 quick reference sheets of notes can help you. Like those aren't going to help you with the documents. Those aren't going to help you make a thesis statement. But they're going to help you with this outside information. I think that's why another reason why they're giving up the 2 points, because you kind of have more of an opportunity to come up with those pretty quickly. So it has to be outside of the documents, but they're going to be looking for specific, right? Specific kind of vocabulary terms, people, events. You want to be as specific as possible. That's how you're going to get these points. And once again, if you put one piece of outside information, per body paragraph, you could potentially get these 2 points.
And I think, just a point of emphasis there is you need to explain it. You need to explain how it relates to the topic at hand, so on and so forth. And I actually applaud this. I think outside information is, to me, if you can give examples, just like if you're in a discussion or an argument, when you can bring in, additional things from history where, hey, look, it happened this way in this time period, and it's certainly, though, it's similar to this period. I think that it brings more credibility to your argument, credibility to you as a historian. And, again, forget about the AP exam for a second, but if you're able to bring in outside information that is pertinent to an argument, people are going to listen to you, essentially. And I think this is a good thing, and hopefully you guys can take advantage of this. So, that being said, right now, if you're kind of just average, you're already looking potentially at the possibility of having a 6 or 7 out of 10 right now. And so the last point here, Mr. Hallam and I have talked about this. This is the last part, and I think that this is probably the last thing that should be on your mind. Mr. Hallam, do you want to you kind of add to that? We're talking about the complex understanding, whether it be C statements or synthesis and those types of things.
Right. Yeah. Look, this is the last point. You can do, if you do everything else and don't have time to get to, or can't come up with, a C statement or synthesis paragraph, you can still pass. You can still get a 5 on the AP test, so this is kind of the last thing. If you have that time
you can get an 8 or 9, honestly.
Yeah.
This is just 1 point.
1 point. That's it. So, if you have that time, or you have, you read the prompt and instantly an idea sparks in your head, then I think you can do this. And, we've talked about synthesis at length, and really, I know my focus has been kind of comparing across time periods, right? So if you can compare what the prompt is to a different time period in U.S. history, or it can be, a different time period in a different place in the world, and European history, wherever.
And it can be before or after,
right.
Coincidentally. Yeah.
Either way. Yeah. So that's good.
Yeah. So I would, if you're comfortable with synthesis and, it's a topic that, man, you're really familiar with, go for it, and if you have, you're done with primarily you've kind of outlined things, and you're looking at your time, you got 5 minutes left, whatever it may be, go ahead and go for it. But note that that's not the end all be all for your opportunity to pass this test, and not only pass it, but get a 3, 4, or potentially a 5. I think a 5 too. And again, I've said this to you all year. You need not be perfect. So there is going to be some wiggle room. As we said earlier, there's going to be a little bit of a curve or a scale that's not just national but globally. But certainly, if you can do this, you want to do it. And so that said, that's pretty much the rubric. As we said, it's out of 10 instead of 7. And I really do. I think that some of these things are in here are conducive to your success on this, rather than your failure. Look, I mean, to be honest with you, they're not gonna. They can't have everybody fail. It just can't happen. So, hopefully this has brought some information into your to the parameters of what this test is going to be like. Hopefully, you're not as nervous about it as you may have been, or over the last couple of days, or especially the last couple of weeks where nobody knew what the heck was going on. But certainly, over the course of the next, what do we have, Mr. Hallam, 5 weeks?
Yeah, 5 weeks.
This is what we're going to be building on, whether it's thematic reviews and things like that. We're going to modify some things here. We'll take a 7 document DBQ and give you a 5 one, and give you the opportunity to time yourself, to type one of these things up, and then probably much like what we're doing now, it'll be individually. Mr. Hallam will do it with his APUS kids. I'll do it with my AP Euro kids, but we'll just do a Google, whatever it's called, Hangout, or what's the other? Can't Zoom. Can't do
Google
that.
Meet. No more Zoom. So Google Meet will be good.
Yeah, and actually talk about, like, okay, how did you go about this prompt? How would Mr. Hallam or I do it? How do we go ahead, and what are some of the outside information examples, and just get you familiar with it, and hopefully more comfortable. So, you have anything else to add there, Mr. Hallam? I'm going to stop sharing so I can get back on.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I think definitely over spring break too, start thinking about this formatting, start thinking about, areas where you feel like you're strong or weak. Come with those questions. That's going to be the best way that we can help you. And I know my plan's kind of after spring break to hit the ground running, as Mr. Sieg said, thematic review, and then start to give you some of these DBQs and have you think about them. But think about your strengths and weaknesses, whether it be content or in terms of writing this. And I think both of us will be more than happy to try to reinforce that with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just I kind of am a little bit self-conscious. My quarantine beard is
look, you got to
it's nothing like Mr. Hallam's, but I get random patches.
Trying to get to Ben Roethlisberger status here.
Yeah, so you're on your way, man. You're looking good. All right, guys. So hey, you guys have any specific questions or things of that nature? We're probably going to both post this to our Google Classroom, so you guys can look at it, review it, whatever. And best of luck to you. And I think we're